Sawadee krap. Well, we had this great idea yesterday that we were going to do Ask Tim Anything, and will you have? So I'm going to do my best to move through as many answers as I can as quickly as possible. Some of them I can't possibly, like one was, what are the top 10 things you like about Thailand? That's an entire video on itself, and probably nobody really cares what I think. But here are my answers to these questions on Ask Tim Anything. Where do you get your shirts? I get my shirts from all over the place. This is from H&M. I get other shirts from Zara. Also, some very kind people have donated some very smart shirts at different times. So I don't have any particular supplier. I've got around about 50 different shirts, which I circulate. Unfortunately, at the moment, all my best shirts are up in Bangkok. I've got to do something about getting them down here to Phuket whilst we're during this, well, rather difficult time. Did you meet Neil Davis? I have no idea who Neil Davis is. Why is it so difficult to have friendships with Thais? It's an interesting question. I actually have some very good Thai friends. I think there are obviously some cultural barriers, some differences in the way that people are brought up, some differences in the education system. But if you work at it, you can have some very rewarding relationships with Thais. I have to say that if you speak the local lingo, if you speak fluent Thai, it's going to make those friendships much easier, because a lot of the way that Thais think is wrapped up in their rather confusing language. So I think you can have perfectly good relationships and friendships with Thais. It's really just a matter of keeping open-minded and being prepared for a few stumbles. Do you think the Thai government can effectively control Thai borders, especially Thai-Myanmar border, to stop the inflow? Well, the Thai-Myanmar border is around 2,500 kilometres long, and there are multiple checkpoints, but 99% of that border is basically jungle and a few hard-beaten tracks by local villagers who for centuries have just moved across what we now call the border. So the answer effectively is no, although clearly the Thais are trying. Why have you guys not set up a talk plus music English speaking radio for Bangkok and the surrounding provinces? Well, the Thaiger actually started as a radio station in Phuket in 2016, and it was operated for 2 years and was very successful. We looked at doing a Bangkok FM radio station, but the problem is that the high power FM transmitters are all owned by either the government or the army, and they cost a fortune to lease, and the leases usually have strings attached, like including a certain amount of government programming. So the reason you don't have any really good English FM radio stations in Bangkok is because of that reason. And the other reason is that FM, well, it's sort of a bit of an old technology. It's a bit like CDs or VHS. Times have moved on. I haven't listened to the perfectly good FM radio in my own car for probably 3 or 4 years now. I just listen to podcasts, punch my phone into the speaker system, and yeah, I don't listen to any FM radio at all. Not that you want to come back home, but I don't think you can come home. How does that feel? I'm not really sure what you mean by that. Of course, it's difficult to go back to Australia at the moment because of the current COVID situation. Whether I want to go back home, well, the fact is I actually see Thailand as my home now. I've been here for 10 years and I probably want to stay here if that's the way my cards fall. Based on the current vaccination speed, do you think Thailand can get back to pre-COVID days anytime this year? I think whenever we talk about pre-COVID days, we're being nostalgic. I don't think there are going to be any pre-COVID days, except for the actual pre-COVID days. What we're going to have in the future is going to be dynamic and different. Some people call it the new normal. It's certainly not going to be normal, and it's probably not what we think it's going to be. The days of 40 million people, 40 million international travellers coming to Thailand are in the rearview mirror. That is not going to happen again for decades, if it's going to happen at all. The whole world travel situation has changed, and it's changed forever. So I don't think we're going to see a return to those numbers of mass tourism in Thailand ever. There are so many fantastic places to live in Thailand. What qualities attracted you to choose Phuket? I came to Phuket 10 years ago because I liked beaches. And if you like beaches, there's probably no better to stay than Phuket because of the availability of some 32 really nice beaches. And there's all the islands off Phuket as well. There's also the international airport that, well, not at the moment, it has a lot of international flights going in and out every day to literally just about every part of the world, plus all the major spots in Thailand. So from a convenience point of view, from a business point of view, it's a good place to live. Sure, it's a tourist island, and I really don't get involved with the west coast of the island at all, and my entire life revolves around the east side of the island, where the locals live, where most of the expats live, and where most of the normal life occurs. And I've got my friends here. I just happen to like living in Phuket. Where's the best place to find hookers and coke during a pandemic? Well, I don't know a lot about hookers. However, I can highly recommend 7-Eleven and Family Mart for a great range of coke, including, and I'd highly recommend this, the new orange flavour coke with no sugar. Tim, do you really think the Phuket Sandbox model will still launch in July? Well, that's pretty simple. No. Who does your hair? Well, I'm happy to report that Mother Nature does my hair with very little help from me. Have you been to the windmill in Pattaya? Well, I fear I'm being dragged into a bit of a gotcha question here. The short and truthful answer is no, I've never heard about the windmill in Pattaya. Please clarify if yoga studios in Phuket fall under the gym indoor workout. Are they supposed to be open at this stage? No, they should be closed. Does Tim Newton recommend Thailand as a full-time retirement destination in the future, or as a place to travel to for perhaps several months per year during a person's retirement? Despite the various hurdles, I think Thailand remains a great place for retirees. Certainly if you're going to stay in the major expat haunts, that would be Bangkok, Pattaya, Phuket, Chiang Mai, Hua Hin, maybe to a lesser extent maybe Khon Kaen, or up in the northeast at one of the major city areas. There's plenty to do for retirees. There's very good services, there's excellent private hospitals, but it comes at a cost, and the Thai baht is still quite high, so the value isn't quite as good as it used to be. But regarding lifestyle, I think Thailand's pretty hard to beat. Will Thailand be getting Moderna or Pfizer vaccines in the future? Well, what we know about that is that the government have approached Pfizer to purchase some of the vaccines from them, and I imagine that at some stage in the future they will become available. Whether we'll have the choice, whether we want that vaccine or a different vaccine, we don't know yet. What's the meaning of Thaiger? Well, there's a short answer to this and there's the longer story. I'll give you the short one. Thaiger was a name I came up with at about 3 a.m. one morning, when just after I'd signed the contract on a radio station to operate in Phuket. Now I needed a name and a logo by 7 a.m. the next morning. So I used to work for a radio station in Australia called The Fox, Fox 101.9 FM. And it used the picture or a cartoon of a fox, and it gave it a sort of a cunning, clever, cheeky type vibe. So I wanted to recreate that for this radio station. So I thought, well, what is an animal that would work here in Thailand? You could have scorpions or cobras or elephants. I thought, well, none of them sort of really work. How about the Indo-Chinese tiger? Tiger. It hit me all at once that it just all worked. Thaiger. And the colours, the yellow and the black and the logo all came in the next 5 minutes, and really nothing has changed. So it's not as if there's a lot of meaning behind it. It was just a cute play on words that has seemed to have worked and people like it. Do you miss the UK? Well, if you're asking whether I'm British, I'm actually from Melbourne in Australia. I've actually been to the UK 3 times, and I have to say in all 3 cases, the best thing about the UK was the departure lounge at Heathrow Airport. What about foreign embassy missions to Thailand providing COVID vaccines to their citizens? A few of the foreign embassies have addressed this issue and they are currently negotiating with the government. There's nothing firmed up at this stage by any country's embassies. I've registered with the Australian Embassy. I've also registered with a private hospital, and that's about my only outlets to apply for or register for a vaccine to get in a queue. So at the moment, just because you're a citizen of a certain country is not necessarily going to guarantee you a place in a COVID vaccine queue. When will I get my refund from Thai Airways? Well, I'm not really sure how long never is, but it's going to be at least that long. What food do you like, Tim? I like all sorts of foods. I actually went to boarding school for 7 years, and if I was able to eat all the indigestible slop that was served over those 7 years, I can pretty much eat anything. I actually love Thai food, and there's no use moving to Thailand unless you like Thai food. There's plenty of foreign and international food available, but you usually pay a lot more for it, and the Thai food is universally good, whether you buy it on the street or go to a 5-star restaurant or something very high-so at the top of a hotel. Thai food is one of the great cuisines in the world, and I love it, but not too spicy. Are you bored now in Thailand? Is that why you do this job, or are you simply doing it for money? Well, short answer is I'm doing it for money. I'm completely invested in the Thaiger. It's my future. It's actually what I like doing. So even if I wasn't earning money from it, I'd probably be doing something similar anyway. But Thaiger is my future, and no, it's not a vanity project. I actually am trying to do it professionally and properly and do it well and hopefully make enough to retire. About the COVID situation, what are you thinking when it comes to high season? Are we allowed to come without quarantine, vaccinated or not? The way the news cycle is going at the moment with the current COVID situation, we're not really sure what's going to happen tomorrow, let alone in 7 or 8 months when the next high season rolls around, which is usually around about the start of December each year. Actually, the high season, or the perception of a high season, is not as obvious as it used to be, because the tourists coming in the middle of the year were getting quite close to the numbers of tourists coming over the historic high season, which matched the Western holidays around Christmas and New Year. But I think it's very difficult to know what's going to be happening in the next week, let alone the next 7 months. What's the latest on the introduction of new types of visas? Well, there's always talk about new types of visas. At the moment, they're talking about upgrading the current smart visa to perhaps make it more useful for people who are described as digital nomads. But other than that, there's not a lot of other talk about changing the current visa types. I mean, you can come to Thailand at the moment if you want. Of course, there's quite a lot of paperwork and hoops you're going to have to jump through at this stage. But Thailand is open, the borders are open if you are able to go through all those hoops and you really need to get here or you really want to get here. Why did you decide to hire Jet? Well, ultimately with this YouTube channel, we want to grow the content. And as you've seen in the past, we've tried all sorts of different ways to provide different and more flexible content for you. Jet actually happens to be a very skilled and very good young newsreader, and hopefully in time he'll be doing more stuff with us. I slowly want to disappear into the background, but at the moment I'm really enjoying being involved in making this channel work, getting more viewers, and trying to provide some really good and accurate, timely content. Jed is one of the early members of the team, and we're very lucky to have him with us. What fascinates you the most about the wonderful Ladyboys in Thailand? Well, I'm not really fascinated in Ladyboys. In fact, the Thais aren't particularly fascinated with Ladyboys. It seems to be a fascination mostly for mostly Western men. I've had some great chats with Ladyboys in the past and some rollicking good conversations, but I'm certainly not fascinated by Ladyboys. Have you ever thought about investigative journalism? Well, it's a good question. I'm not a journalist and I don't see myself as a person with the skills to do heavy investigative journalism. Also, as a foreigner, that's not really my job here in Thailand. We'll leave the investigative journalism to the Thais. It would be basically illegal for me to work as an investigative journalist here in Thailand. We provide the news, we report it as well as we can. We're about providing accurate content, and investigative journalism isn't really something that I've ever wanted to do in the past or aim to do in the future. What is your usual diet, including supplements, calories, beliefs or adherence to saturated fats, abstinence from alcohol, etc.? That's quite a big question. I actually eat a fairly good diet. I've been a bit of a health nut through most of my life. I always have a good solid breakfast every day, healthy, either cereal and fruit and low-fat milk and yogurt, or I might have a cooked breakfast, but try and avoid things like too much bacon or saturated fats. Same with the rest of my diet during the day. I try and reduce the amount of fats, salts and sugars in my diet. I'm not a vegetarian, although I have been a vegetarian for about 6 or 7 years during my life, but not over the past 20 years or so. I don't drink alcohol. I've never drunk alcohol at any stage in my life, and I've never used recreational drugs or have an intention to use them in the future. About as heavy as I get with drug use is the occasional paracetamol. Tim, because I really love Thai temples, which one do you like the most? Well, there's one thing there's plenty of in Thailand is temples. And they used to call it the land of 1,000 temples, and now I think they call it the land of 1,007 11s. Actually 12,000 to be exact. Yes, I have seen many temples whilst I'm here in Thailand. I don't really go and chase them out, but I have been to a few of them taking friends. Here in Phuket there's one at Wat Chalong, which is particularly beautiful. Very hard though to beat the Grand Palace, where you've got quite a few different temples in that amazing temple ground. So yeah, I would say probably the Grand Palace has the best range and the most exotic temples here in Thailand. Oh, there's actually one up on Mai Khao Beach in Phuket, which is built entirely out of timber. So I did find that fascinating and quite beautiful in its own way, just for the pure engineering of how they make it stay up. Will Thailand ever sort out its wire problem? I know what you mean. All those wires, not only electricity wires, there's communication cables, phone companies, internet, and they do make a bit of a mess. They have in some of the high profile locations started to put them underground, and there's definitely a program by the major councils around Thailand to start putting a lot of that cabling underground. What annoys you more? A Prime Minister that quotes Doris Day, "Whatever will be," or 2, restrictions imposed by the Majestic laws? Well, yes, the Prime Minister did famously say just before Songkran that they're not going to introduce restrictions. Whatever will be, will be. As regards the Majestic laws, we all understand why those laws exist, and whilst we may disagree with them, we just have to live with them. In both cases, I find them a bit annoying, but I live in Thailand, I'm a guest here, and I'll follow the rules. Tim, what's your favourite Thai meal, drink and snack? Ooh, I can say honestly that my favourite Thai meal is a green chicken curry, but not too spicy. When it comes to snacks, I have to say I love those, I don't even know what they are, on a stick in a 7-Eleven, but they're usually on a bain-marie. They've been sitting there for hours at a lukewarm temperature, but oh wow, they taste amazing as a snack. I think they're about 20 baht and there's 4 of them on the stick. For a drink, there is nothing better than a mango shake. During mango season, and depending on the quality of the mango they used, mango shake cannot beat it. No sugar. Tim, you claim to be older, but you look pretty fit. I'll admit it. I bet some of us are curious about how old you are actually. Well, in my mind, being fit is not just about going to the gym or going for a run around the block. It's about being mentally fit and emotionally fit as well. So being happy is the most important thing in my life. I don't really do anything outward to keep fit. I work around the garden. I usually try and go for a walk around our neighbourhood every day. I'm actually 62 years old and I'm feeling as fit as I've felt at any time in my life. How is it that you've lived here in Thailand for 10 years and not able to speak conversational Thai? Have you ever taken a formal language class? Well, the simple answer is that I'm just stupid. I've tried over the years 3 different times to learn what the squiggles are, tried to learn the grammar, and tried to learn phrases. I seem to learn something one day, and by the time I wake up the next day, I've forgotten it. I know a little bit of Thai. I can order my food in Thai, but I certainly am a long way from conversational. I don't think I'll ever be able to speak conversational Thai. I think it's also because I've only really learned one language during my life and never been exposed at a younger age to learn a different language. So my brain hasn't had the opportunity to get the wiring together to be able to understand and learn different languages. Well, that's my excuse and I'm sticking to it. Are you a Freemason and are you aware of elite gender inversion? No and no. If war broke out between the US and China, who do you think Thailand would side with? Well, that's a really interesting question. Thailand over the past 100 years has had a history of remaining neutral in most of those biggest conflicts. It's also culturally got a long history with the Chinese, and there are a lot of Thai Chinese ethnically in the country. From an investment point of view, there's not a lot of high-level Chinese investment in Thailand, but there's a lot of low-level investment from people buying condos and small businesses and things like that. Also, Thailand has a long history, stretching back a few centuries, with the United States. Indeed, the former King Bhumibol Adulyadej, was born in America in Boston, Massachusetts. So my guess is that they wouldn't side with anybody, and they, from time to time, like to play the field. Tim, I love the Thaiger, but why do you attract so many naysayers and critics in your comment section? Well, I suppose we are a news organisation, and from time to time we report things that are potentially controversial, but I can say that going through the comments section is the most depressing thing that I do every day, and it's very tiring and it really wears on me, and from time to time you just lose patience and you ban people. What is your take on the current situation in Myanmar? Do you believe the situation will escalate? We've actually done a few videos about this. My personal feeling is that Myanmar is a bit of a basket case and has been for a long time. Yes, I think it will escalate. I think there will be some sort of limited civil war. It won't be an outright A versus B conflict, but there will be a lot of civil unrest for quite a long time there. Will the Thai government get involved? I dare say they probably won't. However, they will have to do something about the refugees that will try and flow across the very porous Thai-Myanmar border. So expect to see more refugee camps being set up there along the way. And finally, can you do an American accent? Interesting this, because I've never heard an American do a good Australian accent. I think about Meryl Streep playing Lindy Chamberlain in that movie all those years ago. Even Meryl Streep couldn't do an Australian accent. There are a lot of Australian actors that can do good American accents. People like Hugh Jackman, Russell Crowe, well actually, sorry, he's from New Zealand, Guy Pearce. There's quite a lot of Australian actors that do get away with a good American accent. I can do an American accent, but I'm not going to embarrass myself by doing it here. Given that there are quite a few American accents, I can probably do a better Southern accent than I can do a Northern American accent. Anyway, with that, we'll leave it. I'll try and get to the other questions on another Ask Tim Anything. If you've got all the way to the end of this video, well done. I have no idea why you're interested in what I think, But they're my honest answers to all those questions. Hope you have a good rest of the day. Thanks for watching.